High in the remote peaks, nestled among the unforgiving wilderness, lay the forgotten town of Hollow Creek. Isolated and shrouded in an eerie silence, it was a place where shadows seemed longer and the wind carried whispers of ancient evils. For generations, a chilling legend had been passed down through the townsfolk, the tale of the fire pit of demons, a pit of fire, eternally burning, nestled deep within the woods, a place where the veil between worlds was thin and unspeakable horrors resided. The elders spoke of the pit in hushed tones, their faces etched with fear. They warned the children to never stray from the beaten path, for the pit held a malevolent power, a hunger that could never be satiated. The very air around it was said to be thick with despair, a siren call to lost souls and tormented minds. But like all legends, the truth had become blurred with time, a haunting story meant to keep the young and foolish at bay. Yet the truth, as it always does, had a way of revealing itself. The discovery of the pit was as accidental as it was horrifying. The early settlers, seeking a new life far from the constraints of civilization, stumbled upon the fiery abyss while clearing a path through the dense forest. The flames, a grotesque dance of orange and crimson, burned with an unnatural intensity, defying all logic. No fuel fed their relentless hunger, and no storm could extinguish their malevolent glow. The heat emanating from the pit was oppressive, suffocating, yet it held a strange allure. Those who dared to approach too closely felt an unsettling pull, a whisper of promises on the wind. It was as if the pit itself were a living entity, its fiery maw thirsting for something far more sinister than wood or coal. Whispers of a curse began to circulate among the settlers. An ancient evil, they murmured, lay dormant within the fiery depths, an evil that watched and waited for its moment to claim the unsuspecting. Years later, a young man named Samuel, known for his reckless spirit and thirst for adventure, scoffed at the legends. Disregarding the warnings of the elders, he ventured into the woods, determined to prove the stories were nothing more than folklore. He approached the pit with a bravado that bordered on arrogance, his laughter echoing through the silent trees. The fire danced and swirled as he drew near, as if beckoning him closer. A sense of unease crept over him, a prickling sensation on the back of his neck. But it was too late. The pit's pull intensified, a magnetic force that he was powerless to resist. The ground crumbled beneath his feet, and with a strangled cry, Samuel was swallowed by the inferno. The flames roared and hissed, savoring their victory. News of Samuel's disappearance spread through Hollow Creek like wildfire, igniting a blaze of fear and panic. Search parties were formed, but the dense woods held no trace of the young man. He had vanished without a trace, consumed by the legend he had so readily dismissed. Days turned into weeks, and the townsfolk grew increasingly desperate. Their fear morphed into a chilling realization. The pit was not merely a natural phenomenon, it was a gateway, a conduit to a realm of darkness from which there was no escape. Their worst nightmares had become reality. The elders, their faces etched with a lifetime of fear and regret, knew the truth. The pit was no longer dormant. It had tasted human flesh and found it desirable. It craved more. The pit's influence began to seep into Hollow Creek like a poisonous fog. Nightmares plagued the townsfolk, visions of fire and screams echoing in their sleep. Shadowy figures with eyes like burning coals were glimpsed at the edge of the woods, their forms shifting and flickering in the moonlight. The air grew heavy with the stench of sulfur, a constant reminder of the evil that lurked so close. One fateful night, a group of teenagers, emboldened by youthful bravado and a healthy dose of liquid courage, decided to venture into the woods. They were determined to prove their bravery, to stare down the legend of the fire pit of demons. Among them was Jacob, a quiet, observant boy on the cusp of manhood. He had always been skeptical of the stories, dismissing them as old wives' tales. Tonight, however, he couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the air grew colder, the silence broken only by the sound of their own ragged breathing. The smell of sulfur intensified, stinging their nostrils and bringing tears to their eyes. Jacob's heart pounded in his chest, a frantic drum against his ribs. He wanted to turn back to urge his friends to reconsider, but the words caught in his throat. They stumbled upon the clearing, the fire pit a raging inferno in the center. Flames danced and swirled, casting grotesque shadows that seemed to writhe and contort with a life of their own. The heat was unbearable, suffocating, and Jacob felt a primal fear grip his insides. Then he saw them. Emerging from the woods, their bodies wreathed in flames, were figures that could only be described as demonic. Their eyes glowed with an infernal light, and their mouths were twisted into grotesque grins. The teenagers froze, their bravado evaporating like mist in the face of true horror. Screams ripped through the night as the creatures lunged, their claws bared, their laughter a chorus of pure evil. Jacob watched in terror as his friends were dragged towards the pit, their pleas for mercy swallowed by the roar of the flames. He knew he had to escape, to somehow outrun the nightmare unfolding before his eyes. Turning on his heel, he fled blindly through the woods, the screams of his friends echoing in his ears. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs screamed for respite. The image of the demon seared into his mind's eye. Jacob emerged from the woods hours later, his clothes torn, his body battered and bruised. He stumbled into town, his eyes wild with terror, his voice hoarse from screaming. His words were a jumbled mess, a torrent of fear and madness that made little sense to the townsfolk, but they saw the terror in his eyes, the raw, primal fear that spoke of an encounter with something truly evil. The pit had claimed more victims, its hunger growing with each passing day. The town was under siege, its people living in a constant state of fear. The whispers of madness that had once been confined to the shadows were growing louder, more insistent. Hollow Creek was trapped, a prison surrounded by an invisible wall of terror. The townsfolk barricaded themselves in their homes, too afraid to venture out after dark. The once vibrant community had become a ghost town, its streets deserted, its silence broken only by the howl of the wind and the distant roar of the flames. The pit had poisoned their lives, infected their dreams with its darkness. The elders, their faces etched with a lifetime of regret, could only watch as their town crumbled around them. They had failed to protect their own. Years later, the legend of the fire pit of demons continued to haunt Hollow Creek. The pit remained, a constant reminder of the horrors that lay hidden beneath the surface of their world. Jacob, forever scarred by his experience, became a recluse, his mind teetering on the edge of madness. He was a living testament to the pit's power, a walking, talking warning to anyone foolish enough to tempt fate. The town bore the scars of its encounter with evil, its spirit broken, its people forever changed. The laughter of children was replaced by whispers of fear, their dreams haunted by images of fire and demons. The fire pit of demons had left an indelible mark on Hollow Creek, a legacy of fear and despair that would be passed down through generations. It was a chilling reminder that some evils cannot be contained, some horrors cannot be outrun. The pit remained, a fiery maw in the heart of the wilderness, waiting to claim its next victim. And the town lived on, forever in its shadow.